Most people believe wealth is about money. It is not. What rich families pass down across generations has almost nothing to do with the amount in their bank accounts, and almost everything to do with something far harder to see. This is the wealth code. Stay with me until the section on legal structures, because there is one specific tool the ultra-wealthy use that is completely legal, almost never discussed, and available to anyone. Most people will never hear about it. The Vanderbilts built the largest private fortune in American history. By 1877, Cornelius Vanderbilt had accumulated wealth equivalent to $185 billion in today's money. 60 years later, his descendants held a reunion. Not a single one of them was a millionaire. Not one. In 2015, researchers at the National Bureau of Economic Research published findings that traced generational wealth across multiple family lines. Their conclusion was stark: 70% of wealthy families lose their wealth by the second generation. 90% by the third. But here is the part that almost nobody asks: why do some families beat those odds, consistently, across 5, 6, 7 generations? What do the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, the Waltons know that the Vanderbilts did not? The answer is not what you think. The reason generational wealth collapses is not bad luck, inflation, or even poor investment decisions. It is a psychological transfer failure. The money was never really the asset, the mindset that created the money was. And mindsets do not automatically inherit. Every generation that receives wealth without receiving the mental architecture behind it is essentially handing a Formula One car to someone who has only ever ridden a bicycle. The machine is extraordinary. The operator is unprepared. The crash is inevitable. And the financial industry, the advisors, the banks, the estate planners, they profit from that crash. Liquidated assets mean fees. Reset wealth means new clients. The cycle serves them perfectly. Let us talk about the science. Because this is not speculation, this is documented human behavior. Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky's foundational research on loss aversion tells us that people feel the pain of losing something roughly twice as intensely as the pleasure of gaining the same thing. Now apply that to inherited wealth. Someone who builds wealth feels every gain as hard-won. They are calibrated to protect it because they remember the cost of not having it. But their child, raised in abundance, has no such calibration. Their baseline is already high. Loss aversion activates too late, if at all. There is also what psychologist Sonia Luther at Arizona State University called the hidden vulnerability of affluence. Her research showed that children of the wealthy consistently display higher rates of anxiety, substance use, and low self-efficacy compared to middle-class peers. They are materially rich and psychologically fragile, a combination that destroys capital at speed. Then there is the availability heuristic. When money has always been available, the brain does not register scarcity as a real threat. Decisions become loose. Urgency disappears. Spending patterns stretch to fill whatever space the wealth provides. This is not a character flaw. It is a predictable cognitive outcome. Now let us talk about who profits from keeping this invisible. The American public education system spends an average of 13 years teaching children. Personal finance is mandatory in fewer than half of U.S. states, and where it is taught, it covers budgeting, not wealth architecture. Not asset structures. Not tax strategy. Not intergenerational transfer. That is not an accident. The wealth management industry manages over $89 trillion globally. Firms like Goldman Sachs, J.P. Morgan Private Bank, and UBS have entire divisions dedicated to preserving ultra-high net worth wealth across generations. They call it family office services. The minimum entry point is typically $10 million. Below that threshold, you are on your own. You get a retail advisor incentivized by commission, a tax system that taxes income more aggressively than capital gains, and an education system that taught you how to be an employee. The structural gap is not accidental. It is architectural. Tax law in most Western economies actively rewards existing wealth. Capital gains tax in the United States sits below income tax rates. The step-up in basis rule, which resets the taxable cost of inherited assets to their current market value, effectively erases decades of capital gains at the moment of inheritance. Wealthy families know this. They structure around it deliberately. Most people have never heard the phrase step-up in basis in their lives. Retention peak. But here is the part that will actually change how you see money. The wealthiest families do not primarily pass down money. They pass down a proprietary relationship with money, and they do it through something almost embarrassingly simple: dinner table conversations. Not formal lessons. Not trusts. Not advisors. Conversations. Researcher James Hughes Jr., who spent decades advising multi-generational wealthy families, documented this in his book Family Wealth. The families that maintained wealth across 5 or more generations shared one defining trait: they talked about money constantly, openly, and specifically. Not as a taboo. Not as a source of shame or pride. As a living system that required active management and shared understanding. Children in these families absorbed, before they could even articulate it, that wealth is not a destination. It is a practice. They watched decisions being made. They heard the logic behind them. They understood, viscerally, that money without a purpose evaporates. The families that lost everything treated wealth as an outcome. The families that kept it treated wealth as a responsibility that demanded ongoing education, governance, and humility. The tool was not a financial instrument. It was language. And language costs nothing. Let us be specific, because vague advice is worthless. First, wealthy families conduct formal family meetings. Not Christmas dinners. Structured quarterly or annual meetings where the family reviews assets, discusses values, and makes collective decisions. The children are included early, not to receive information, but to build financial fluency through participation. The habit of governance is installed before the assets arrive. Second, they separate consumption accounts from capital accounts, cognitively and structurally. Money that can be spent is held differently from money that must grow. This is not just accounting. It rewires how family members perceive the wealth. One pool is for life. The other is untouchable by identity. Third, they use irrevocable trusts, specifically spendthrift trusts, to protect assets from the beneficiary themselves. The trust owns the wealth. The person accesses income or distributions under defined conditions. This is the legal structure most people never hear about. It removes the psychological risk of sudden access to large capital, the Vanderbilt problem, by design. Fourth, they delay inheritance deliberately. Research from wealth psychologist J. Hughes found that heirs who received structured inheritance in tranches, tied to life milestones, demonstrated financial competence, or age thresholds, maintained wealth at dramatically higher rates than those who received lump sums. The timing of inheritance is as important as the amount. Fifth, they invest in human capital first. Education, mentorship, professional networks, international exposure. These are not luxuries in wealthy family thinking, they are the primary asset class. The financial capital exists to protect and amplify the human capital. Not the other way around. If you were not raised in that system, this is not a eulogy. This is a blueprint. 1. Start the conversation now, regardless of what you have. The dinner table habit does not require wealth, it requires intention. Talk to your children, your partner, your family about money openly and specifically. Name numbers. Name decisions. Name mistakes. Fluency is built through repetition, not formal instruction. Start this week. There is no minimum balance required. 2. Legally separate your money by function. Open distinct accounts for consumption and capital, even if both are small. Label them differently. Treat the capital account as structurally off-limits for lifestyle spending. This cognitive separation is what wealthy families encode structurally through trusts. You can encode it behaviorally right now, with a second bank account and a rule you commit to in writing. 3. Learn one legal structure per quarter. Spendthrift trusts. Step up in basis. Family limited partnerships. Roth conversion ladders. These are not complex, they feel complex because no one taught you. Each quarter, research one tool used by wealthy families to preserve and transfer wealth. One tool. 12 tools in a year is 12 tools more than most people will ever have. 4. Build the governance habit before you need it. Wealthy families do not create financial governance when the stakes are high, they have practiced it for decades before the stakes arrive. Start holding monthly reviews of your finances. Treat it like a board meeting. Bring data. Make decisions. Document them. The habit is the asset. The discipline compounds before the money does. Generational wealth is not inherited through money, it is inherited through the psychology, language, and legal architecture that money requires to survive. What the Rockefellers understood, and what the Vanderbilts did not, is that wealth without a system attached to it has an expiration date. The money is never the moat. The thinking is. You do not need to be born into a wealthy family to adopt the architecture of one. You need to start, today, building the habits, the conversations, and the structures that make wealth inheritable. If this shifted something for you, subscribe, because tomorrow we go even deeper. Next, watch our video on why your relationship with money was formed before you were 7 years old, and how to rewire it as an adult. It will reframe everything you thought you knew about your own financial behavior. This is the Wealth Code.